Today is October 27th, 2012, and my name is Kat Bell. I'm interviewing Jan Hoegh, who volunteered for the Boulder Action for Soviet Jewry. This interview is being recorded for the Maria Rogers Oral History Association, or program, and is being recorded by Kat Bell. So to start off, Jan, tell me when and where you were born.
I was born in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1948.
And did you grow up there?
No, my family, we were residents of Iowa, small town Sheraton, Iowa, about 5,000 people. But we came out here every summer, starting the year I was born. My folks built a little cabin in the mountains, and we came out here to be in Colorado. My folks had always been in love with Colorado, so we spent a lot of time here.
What kind of community did you grow up in?
Well, it was a small Midwestern town, as I said, about 5,000 people, surrounded by farming areas. So it has small town businesses and then a lot of agriculture, and predominantly white Anglo-Saxon Protestants.
Okay. And did you go to college after high school?
I did. I went back to the town where I was born, Colorado College in Colorado Springs.
Hmm. What did you major in?
I majored in sociology.
Oh. Were you involved with any kind of activism before the BASJ?
Yes, I was involved. Activism is such a broad term. I've been involved in politics in some way all my life. I was very involved in the women's movement. I was initially out of college in 1970. I was a reporter on a newspaper, and the issues then were the women's movement, the peace movement, welfare rights. So as a reporter, I was learning about those things, and it also dovetailed well with my sociology background. And then after that, I was less the journalist and more the activist in terms of the women's movement.
And when did you move to Boulder?
In 1974, I think.
Okay. And how did you get involved with the BASJ?
My partner worked at a car dealership and was asked to hire one of the refugees. And she did, and the rest is history. We just got very involved in the community. He didn't know much English at all, and his daughter, one of his daughters, came to help him, and we just got to know that family particularly well. And it just went from there. We had a truck, so that was good for gathering furniture and or meeting people who were just coming in, meeting them at the airport and putting all their bags in the truck. And so it just snowballed, I guess, from there.
And what was your title with the BASJ?
Well, there was no title except for just a few months when I was volunteer coordinator. And that was a job that wasn't coordinating volunteers per se, but was finding professionals in the community who would donate services to the refugees. Some refugees who came who were older, could get old age pension support, but others you know, it was more problematic. So I would find dentists and doctors who would donate time and take kids or adults to their appointments, that kind of thing.
How did you find dentists and doctors who would be willing to donate time?
Mostly, my guess is, and I don't recall, Barbara Gould or someone in the organization seemed to know who the possibilities were. So I just went by the leads I was given. That's how I recall it. I don't know. I was also doing some I was also at some point starting to go to school when I was volunteer coordinator, so everything was kind of a blur going back to school and doing that. So.
What were you going to school for?
To become a teacher.
Oh.
Yeah. I think I saw the importance of knowing how to learn. I'd seen it in various workplaces. I felt that I had been pretty lucky to do all kinds of things, and that was because I knew how to learn. So I wanted to pass that on, and I think that realization came one day when we were taking a bunch of the refugee children from Tajikistan, mostly Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, to the Moscow circus, and the conversation went there somehow to Jan, why don't you think about teaching? So, and at that point I was, I think I was in the car business. I was a parts manager at a local dealership and started going to school. So, and I think a lot of my experience with the BASJ community prompted that too, because I did a lot of sort of ESL, English as a second language support for them, and adults and children. Volunteered in the Boulder city program for teaching English as a second language, and a lot of the adults I was teaching were part of the BASJ program.
Okay. Did you speak any Russian when you started teaching them ESL?
I knew how to say hello and how are you, or thought I did. I had taken Russian in 4th grade as an after-school program way back in the 50s. And somehow I seem to have hung on to that. And working with the BASJ community, I and some other folks associated with the BASJ program took a Russian class, continuing ed at CU. I'm not sure, I don't even remember how many classes there were, how many times we met. I just remember when they wrote the date on the blackboard, it took up practically the whole blackboard because of all the declensions in Russian. But so I could speak a little bit of Russian, which I think put some people at ease a little bit, or at least gave them a good reason to laugh. And I tried to learn what I could. But they spoke not just Russian, but also Persian, as they called it, and because Tajikistan is right in that part of the world, a large Islamic presence. So sometimes people went into Persian when they didn't want either the kids or visitors to really know what they were saying. It was kind of interesting.
Did they not teach the kids Persian?
I don't know. It depends on the age of the kids. I think that surely some of the children knew plenty of Persian. So I don't know if it was just about the little ones or what, you know, or just those of us who were visitors. I don't know.
Okay. What kind of challenges came up in helping the new Americans learn English?
Challenges with language. Well, there were so many different ways to go through being an immigrant. Some people came here with great expectations of becoming capitalists. Some people came here hoping to bring as much of their culture with them as possible. Not that the two have to be cancel each other, but just different kinds of emphasis. So some people were interested in learning English, very interested, worked very hard at it, and others weren't as interested because they could still, because there was a community here, could still do all right without spending a lot of time learning English, at least not in a formal way. But the people that I worked with specifically in an English program were just, those were the ones who wanted to learn and were very polite and dedicated and grateful for the chance. So I also would attend some classes with other refugees and like a continuing ed kind of class at CU perhaps for learning composition through English as a second language, and would sometimes attend those classes with them just to see what they were working on and what the teacher had in mind for them to do, and then sort of tutor them. Also helped tutor children who were in school from preschool to high school, college even, working with them as well. So it was, the whole thing was just sort of a gift to me in my life. It was amazing to sort of look at the United States through immigrant eyes and to see what a little more of that experience, what it really means to come here.
What did you learn about the Soviet immigrant experience?
That, again, you know, there's a whole range, that it could be joyous and that bringing so much of their culture here and letting some of us in on that was, you know, perhaps the greatest beauty of it. Understanding the confusion or the sense of, to use a word that isn't a word, overwhelm, that you know, when you took someone to the grocery store for the first time, all that food, you know, a zillion different kinds of cereal. All they wanted was a little kashi, you know. It was, and just all the fresh vegetables. One of the women used to talk about how they had to stand in line. You know, they'd take turns standing in line back in Tajikistan to stand in line to get a chicken. You'd have to go back to work, so then the next friend would come stand in line to keep your place in line, so that by the end of the day, you had a chicken to take home, and she used to refer to them as the blue chickens, because that was the color of the chickens. It was, you know, so a lot of humor, a lot of music, a lot of the Tajik culture. Then there were folks who were more from a Moscow culture, scientists and doctors whose, most people in the sciences also knew German. So sometimes that helped a little more with English. At least it's the same alphabet, you know, rather than Cyrillic. So I don't know where we were going with that question, or where I was going.
Tell me about what a typical day would look like for you volunteering with the BASJ.
Well, during the day I was mostly working or going to school, depending on the year. And so this was 1991, 2, 3, 4, around there, with perestroika, and then these first families who were coming early, and then more and more and more. So a typical day would be that I was at work or at school. May meet up with people in the, you know, several nights a week to share dinner. Because my friend and I could help with a lot of things. People were very gracious and shared food and music and good times with us in the evenings. But during the day, you know, maybe I took someone to a doctor's appointment, held a hand while something was being worked on, that kind of thing. So many different things. Going to a teacher's conference, you know, in kindergarten or older students. No typical day.
So you said that they would invite you over for dinner. Did they have any dishes you remember very vividly?
Well, rice was a common base for the meals, and maybe lamb, cilantro, lots of chopping going on, so making great dumplings. But I don't know. I guess the rice and lamb kinds of things were. That just always seemed to be great. Really enjoyed that, and every once in a while some borscht, the beet soup. Everybody sort of had a little bit different way of making that, but it was all good.
Were there any issues that seemed to come up really frequently in terms of trouble adapting for the refugees?
Consistent troubles. I suppose language is always a problem. Also, something was happening, and I don't know if this is trouble, but there are so many things to adjust to, as well as to adjust to openly following the Jewish faith. That had never been possible there in Tajikistan. One of the people who was here was a kosher butcher there, but they had to sneak to his butcher shop to get kosher beef, like at midnight. So here all of a sudden, maybe some of those things that, some of the power that was based on secrecy back in Tajikistan didn't always translate well when you come to this country, and people have more open jobs that they need to get and things like that. A lot of responsibility sometimes went to the women who spoke English better sometimes than their husbands. So that puts a real strain, I think, on relationships, where the woman is bringing in the better income. So there were struggles like that. And that's not so different from struggles people are going through now, where jobs are difficult to find, and maybe the person who wasn't bringing in so much income is now the only breadwinner left, or that kind of thing. It's but those kinds of changes in status, both within a family and within the community, I think were real challenges.
What were some of the different ways the new Americans dealt with the differences in Judaism from the former Soviet Union and then here?
They, in terms of in their homes, Friday night remained the most important meal of the week. So that was not a difference, I don't think. But we had synagogues here, and I think that was a different kind of situation for them, to actually get to go to synagogue. So some people did, and some people never quite made that change. Interestingly, I don't know what that was all about, really. But because everyone, your identity and all these things from wherever you live, Tajikistan or Uzbekistan or Russia, to leave all that behind, to come here maybe with several advanced degrees and have no way to get a job because maybe you're in your 60s, and that makes it pretty hard to make a change. So some people would just get to sit in on surgeries. Who maybe someone was a surgeon, they'd be invited to, you know, they could come in and at least see the latest thing that was going on. And there was so many instances of generosity, graciousness. It was nice to just be around all those things where, you know, people are struggling. They've left their parents' graves, everything they've known all their lives, to do this, to get away from a really bad situation. It was a dangerous situation in Tajikistan, certainly. And to make that decision sort of for your children, because it's really hard for the adults to have benefited. They mostly were giving up stuff. And their children, many of them are just thriving. Yeah. And a lot of them became taller than everybody else in their families, probably because of what we put in our food here, but also perhaps because they were just getting a different kind of nutrition, I don't know. But, you know, maybe it was drinking out of those plastic bottles, I don't know. But it was interesting to see even changes in terms of that. And so parents bring their children here, hoping for a better world for their children. But as their children become more Americanized, there's that ache, you know, that we all feel if someone goes a different direction from the direction we've been on. You know, some people worried their children were becoming too American, and yet here they were, they'd brought them here. And so it's, all that stuff is just so difficult. Where I teach, we have a lot of students from other countries, and inevitably when we're reading things about all the challenges to identity when you change from one place to another, and the differences that develop between the younger generation who catches on to the new ways more easily, you know, with less constraint in terms of history. You know, those things are all challenges. They're all tough. But most of the BASJ community, the refugees, felt that this was a kind of struggle that was worst maybe for the first couple of years. And somehow you either became inured to it or you figured out some things that just made it go along better. But it was difficult, you know, there was a lot of emotion. And yet at the same time there was a lot of laughter, you know, a lot of dancing and dining and having fun. So it was just this rich environment, and I was so fortunate to get to be around it at all. Really amazing, because my background is white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and certainly not Eastern European in any way, or Middle Eastern. And it was just a real gift in my life, you know, a mitzvah. So.
Did you have any knowledge of Soviet culture or the Tajik culture before?
Not the Tajik culture, I don't think. I had always been intrigued by the old Russia, I'd taken Russian history, was just fascinated by this big bear that was always turning around to see what was following it. The kind of my high school Russian history teacher used to talk about that Russia was always worried about who was going to attack it, and just as a bear might, be wondering. And so I'd always been fascinated with Russian culture, and a lot of the refugees that were here just brought a lot of that to me again. Playing Russian operas, talking about some of the books that I would read. I mean, they were English translations, but still, it sort of reawakened my interest in the Russian culture, Soviet culture. I had grown up with certain thoughts about the Soviet culture in terms of, communism being a bad thing and all that. And but despite that, I had just always been in love with the culture. So it was great to just be immersed in that, even though it was a Tajik version. It was also bringing back the whole Russian thing, which was great. And it was almost like osmosing language, that you felt you knew exactly what someone was saying, even though you didn't understand a word of it. I mean, that was an interesting thing that happened, especially with older people. And so this is 20 years ago. So talking with them, and it was like we'd have this half-hour conversation, just such an earnest conversation. And I'm not sure we really knew what we were talking about, but we sure thought we did. We sure thought we were communicating. It's really fascinating. It teaches you a lot about communication and humanity. All these differences, and yet maybe they enrich life, the differences, and yet the things that we hold in common allow us to communicate and explore those differences. It's fascinating.
Were there any differences between what you had learned in school about Russian culture and what you found out from the refugees?
I doubt that it would have, this was a totally different situation, and especially because it was in Central Asia. That's so different from everywhere else. And they had videos and stuff, so we'd see they'd show us the marketplaces and the breads and all that stuff. No, this was not a culture I really was familiar with at all. Not Central Asia, with the huge Pamir Mountains and these enormous rushing rivers, and then the desert, hearing from one of the daughters that, it would be so hot there in the summer, maybe, probably like our Phoenix. And she would mop all the floors damp, close all the windows and blinds, and just sit in the dark and try it, with the evaporation, kind of try to have it cooler. So, yeah, there was no book that prepared me for this. Although I did read, during this time I read Soviet Women Walking the Tightrope. Very interesting, and gave me a little more insight into the women's experience, although it was more Soviet oriented rather than Central Asian. But that's a great book. I recommend it.
I'll have to pick it up.
Yeah, or I'll lend it to you.
So, back to Judaism, were there any kind of issues that came up for them now that they had a more open atmosphere to practice Judaism if they wanted to?
I don't know about issues coming up. What I think is that it was the tradition, certainly of Shabbat, that really was an anchor through all this for all these families. You know, they had that important time of the week, and I think that was for many the anchor that just helped them get through this enormous upheaval, you know, ripping oneself from your roots is not easy, but fortunately their religion was a portable root, you know, came with them, and that I'd say that was very important. There are all kinds of different groups within religions, some more conservative than others. That may have been true. I don't know that there were issues around that. I really don't know. There were a couple of synagogues in Boulder, and that probably accommodated a lot of the differences, those having at least two places. Again, I was going to synagogue fairly consistently, and that was great. I mean, I learned a lot about the Jewish religion. I guess I've always been open to learning about how people do things in different ways. So,
anything that stands out as something you learned about the Jewish religion?
The thing that stands out for me is, I believe it's the Kol Nidra, the prayer for those who've died, and that just seems like such a good thing to do. For some reason that stands out. I went to some bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, and I had friends that I grew up with that also had those, but I wasn't invited in those days. Wow, just well, because I grew up in a Christian tradition, we get everything of that from Judaism. So it's like, you know, just getting more in touch with the roots of belief from a tradition I had known. I don't know. But to your original question about issues and stuff, but I certainly, I guess it goes along with my sociology degree. I've just always enjoyed the privilege to be around people who see life differently and experience it differently and are willing to share that. So again, it is mostly a gift to me.
Is there anything you would do differently?
I don't know. I'm not much for considering a question like that. I'm sure there were lots of things I could have done in a better way, but I don't know. Nothing stands out. It was also just to get to know the people in the Boulder community better. People like Barbara Gould and Bill Cohen, Sarah Jane, Roxanne Balin, to get to know how big their hearts are. That was wonderful too. Yeah.
What have you done since the BASJ?
Well, I became a teacher, and so that's what I've been doing. I now teach at a community college, and as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of students who are from, you know, all over the world, and so maybe I'm a little more prepared to understand some of the things they're going through, some of the dynamics perhaps in their families, where here they are going to school. Maybe that makes their parents uncomfortable a little bit, you know, when you're talking about, do you still accept our culture? Are you leaving it behind, or do you still love us and you're going to still follow it? And there have been all kinds of outcomes of the children, you know, that stayed really immersed in the culture, and then others who stepped out of it a little in terms of career and relationships and stuff.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just that everyone involved in the program, whether it was a refugee or resident of Boulder, just got to see really the best of humanity, and I'll always be thankful for that.
Okay, well, I think we're done. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful learning about all of this.
Thank you, Kat.